There was a segment in a stream that I did recently that I thought I recorded, and apparently I didn't. And instead of going back and grabbing that segment, I think I just want to do that whole thing in one go and just kind of lay out my thoughts. And the topic that I was talking about was what it's like to exist politically, not what it's like to exist and engage in politics, but what it's like to exist where your mere existence is political. Now, what does that mean? So, let's say you're a trans person. I'm not a trans person, but it's an easy go-to example. Or you're a gay person. In fact, actually, let's just go with the gay person because this one is really easy to work with before I use the example that more pertains to myself. If you're a gay person, for years, you have probably had the thought in your head that you'd like to marry. Either because you'd like the benefits of marriage that we have on a legal sense, or because you'd like the romantic aspects of marriage, or basically any number of reasons a straight person would want to get married, you would have wanted to do as well. Potentially. If marriage isn't your thing, then of course not. Now, of course, this is ignoring the fact that there are some people who would rather not be married at all because they don't want their relationships tied up in the government or religion or what have you, and that's all valid, but the point still stands. There are people who would like to. And for years, in the United States, the way to go about that was very political. You had a couple of options. You either had to go through an adoption process, because your state legally wouldn't get you married, so you had to adopt to get the same legal benefits. And of course, we had a lot of cases after marriage became a federal thing that was perfectly protected. We had a lot of legal cases come up where people were trying to annul their adoptions in order to actually get married because they'd get the same benefits either way, but they'd rather be married instead of, that. Or you could go to another state where that kind of marriage was legal, which, of course, is another political thing. If you have to travel to do something that your neighbor can do just right there, that is political. That is you having to engage in something that is directly entailed, a direct result of other people's personal politics meddling in your life. That's an example of existing politically. Or, you had another option, which was get involved politically, get involved in protests, get involved in lobbying, get involved in phone banking for candidates that were willing to fight for, when it was a states' rights issue, your state's ability to get you married. You either could accept the system was broken and find ways around it geographically or legal loopholes, or you had to engage in literal, political activism to justify your existence. Because for you to do something that was just accepted for everyone else, you had to do that. Now, this is a thing that trans people have to deal with as well. Especially as the fight for universal health care increases in the United States, as people start to realize, especially with the COVID crisis, that healthcare is kind of important, and you can't just put it behind a paywall. It is a positive human right, and I'm sure there's going to be at least one libertarian in the comment section who's going to freak out about positive rights and how they don't exist. No rights exist. They're all abstract. They only exist insofar as we agree on them. Even your negative rights exist because of conversations that have been had about what negative rights are. So sit back down. Just sit back down. I don't care. I honestly don't. People's ability and people's rights to be taken care of matter far more to me than your opinion. So, when we're talking about healthcare, what does it mean to exist politically for a trans person? Now, I'm a cis person, so I only can give this example based on the interactions that I've had with my friends who are trans. Things like therapy, to even determine if you are or not. Things like HRT, things like surgery, are all things that are locked behind a healthcare wall. Some people can figure out that they're trans without therapy, without having a health professional sit there and just go, hey, you're not performing the way that you were born. So maybe the issue that you're feeling is dysphoria. And sometimes it's not even dysphoria. Sometimes you're trans without dysphoria. But even then, what does that mean? It means that not only does a trans person have to fight for medical things that, for most people, are just, normal aspects of life that have to be taken care of, for them, things like HRT, things like surgeries, things like that to alleviate mental issues, mental anguish that they're dealing with, are political. They're having to fight political battles to gain these rights, because a right to healthcare might not necessarily entail, the way our broken system is, it might not necessarily entail a right to hormones. It might not entail a right to surgery. It might not entail a right to these things that are, for some people, necessary for their mental health. But they still end up having to fight that fight. And it's more than that. What else does it mean to exist politically for a gay or trans person? Again, remember, I'm a cis person explaining this. Best person to ask if you've got a friend who's trans. They will be able to talk about this more. There is a way this relates to me, and I'll get into that here in a sec. But for years, and even now, depending on where you are geographically, depending on how you were raised, existing as gay or existing as trans is a constant battle in trying to validate your existence to your family. Your family might call you by the name you were given at birth, which is not a name you accept. You might have a name that is linked to past trauma, and you are constantly having to argue with your family about, hey, I'm not Jane, I'm Joe. Because I'm male, or I'm a man, not female, or I'm non-binary. When you're having to constantly have those conversations, that's a political thing. Your existence is constantly a political conversation with people around you who might not even be adept at that kind of conversation. They don't know how to navigate it, which means they probably don't know how to do it without insulting you. I know I've had these conversations and accidentally insulted people all the time, and this is my job. Sometimes it's fighting for your rights, and sometimes it's just fighting for the validity of existing inside your family. Now, how does any of this pertain to me? Because this is not a thing that those things are not things that I deal with, but I do have a handful of issues as well. I'm an atheist in a Christian family. I constantly have to take the choice: do I let everyone else in my family know that I'm an atheist? Or do I keep that secret because that keeps the peace? Do I engage in conversations, and when I hear something like, God is going to make it better, God will make things right, and I'm just having to sit there, and it feels insulting because from my perspective, that is just a get-out-of-jail-free card for some people to not actually do anything to help. God will make it right. Okay, well, I'm not asking for God to make it right. I'm asking for advice so you can help me make it right. It feels like kicking the can down so that you don't have to be responsible for helping other people to me. And, do I engage in that conversation? Or do I just sit here and accept the fact that it is better for me to just be quiet about it? Be quiet about that. Same issue with Raz. For years, that was not the name that she went by, and this is the name that she's gone by for years now. She's constantly having to have the conversation correcting, it's not that name, it's Raz. It's not my dead name, it's this name. And having to explain why. When in reality, the first name somebody gives you, you accept just because that's the name they gave you. What's the difference between calling me Chris, Christopher, or Suris? There's really no difference. Christopher. There's no difference to me, but it is easy for somebody to flow through any of those names. It shouldn't be that hard for somebody who is not cis. So I'm having always to determine, is it good for me to be out of the closet for who I am? Because there are some people in my family who know, and there are some people who don't. And the people who don't, I'm in the closet too, because that is a thing that I've evaluated. It's better for me just to not have that conversation. And then one day, when they expire and I am still here, then I will have never had to have had that conversation. And that's a shitty way of looking at it. There are so many conversations I can't have with these people in my family that I love because, well, quite frankly, they'd think that I'd be burning in hell. And it's not just the atheism thing. It's not just my beliefs in regards to gods or religion. It's also the polyamory thing. I can't count how many times I've had to call a partner a roommate, or just say, hey, I had a friend over, or hey, my partner is over at a friend's house, and not just been honest and been like, yeah, they're over at a boyfriend's house, they're over at a girlfriend's house. Hey, I went to go visit my other girlfriend. I went to go visit so-and-so. We all came together and just had a family dinner because everybody in the polycule is dating somebody in some spiderweb fashion. Those are conversations I can't have. But if I were just completely non-poly, if I were completely mono, didn't have the capacity for poly, and if I were Christian, I wouldn't have to have any of these awkward conversations. Same how if somebody were gay or if somebody were trans, how many times, if you are either of those things, have you thought, if you're in the middle of a Raz is playing Phasmophobia over there, and she's screaming. I don't know if that actually does anything in the game, but it's what she does. So it's the same thing. Always having to evaluate, do I tell a family member that I am like this, or do I tell a family member that I'm not like them, or do I just sit here and masquerade? Is it better to masquerade? And that's what it means to live politically. It doesn't mean that you constantly engage in political activism. It means that your existence, you being you, things you can't control, are political. I can't control being an atheist. Nobody has control over their beliefs. So my beliefs on gods that's a thing that I can't influence. It's a conclusion that I came to, and I'm here. If that conclusion changes in the future, again, that'll be outside of my control. I can't control being cis or hetero. But, luckily, for those ones, those are things that I don't have to have awkward conversations about. But I do have to have awkward conversations about my atheism and polyamory. Or what I usually do is just ignore those conversations. Don't talk about them. That's what it's like when your existence is political. It's having to hide pieces of yourself from people because those pieces are outside of their Overton window, which, again, is a political concept. The things that they find acceptable. Your family member might think that, even if you're a Christian, the fact that you're trans or the fact that you're gay means that you're going to be burning in hell, even if you believe in the same God they do. You're going to burn in hell. Or for me, polyamory. I have had Christians tell me that having multiple partners, despite the fact that that was a thing that people engaged in the Bible, means that I'm going to go burn in hell. And can they ever identify a passage in the Bible that says that I'm going to burn in hell for being poly? No, of course not. But that's what it is. And that's kind of another issue entirely, is the fact that so many of these things are tied in people's fundamental beliefs. There's a reason my channel moved into politics and wasn't just... It stopped being just religion and religious debunks and atheist content, and it started moving into social issues and politics because my existence is political. I don't get to avoid it. And even for me, because I'm a cis hetero white guy, it's not as bad as it could be. It's not as bad as it could be. There are fewer awkward conversations I have to have than some of my gay friends or some of my trans friends. So, what's the point of a video like this? I guess this is a catch-all video as a perspective. If you're marginalized in some way, and you feel like you can't have those conversations with your family because you're worried about having backlash, having them, tell you that you're gonna burn in hell, or tell you that, oh, you're gay, our genetic line is not going to continue, or oh, you're polyamory, that means you're gonna get an STD, despite the fact that statistically polyamorous people get themselves tested a whole lot more often, because it's just kind of part of the culture when you're poly. It's existing, having to evaluate, and figure out, do I want to show you who I am? Do I really want to do that? Is it worth it to me to show you who I am, or is it better for me to show you a facsimile of who I am that is perhaps more palatable, perhaps more appropriate? If you are somebody who's dealt with this, who's dealt with existing politically, hopefully a video like this will help show you that there are other people who deal with it too. You're not alone. And if you are somebody who doesn't, if you are somebody who is lucky to where you can just ignore politics completely with your existence, I'm happy for you. This isn't to shit on you. This isn't to say that you're a horrible person. This isn't to say any of that. This is maybe, though, to hopefully give you some perspective. Let you know what it's like existing as someone like me, or someone like a gay person, or someone like a trans person, or depending on where you are, just existing as a minority race. It's certain things you can or can't hide. You can't hide race, but I can hide, my views on theism. I can hide partners behind other labels. But not everybody gets that opportunity, and sometimes it's hard for people to figure out, what's it like from that perspective. So maybe, hopefully, this can give some perspective to you, if that's a thing that you haven't considered. I wanted to do this one just like this instead of doing it in the middle of the stream, because I didn't hit the record buttons in the stream, and I'm not entirely confident with whatever I said on stream. I don't remember, but I do know the gist of it. And the gist of it was sometimes people's existence is political, and they don't get a choice in that. They don't get a choice in anything. And if you are a person who doesn't have that problem, who doesn't have that Achilles heel, maybe make it a point to stand in solidarity with the people you know and love that do have that Achilles heel, that do have that issue. If you got a trans person who's a friend and you haven't told them that, hey, I'm your friend, if you need anything, talk to me, maybe do it. Maybe do it. You don't know if that was the day that their dad decided to tell them, no, you're Rachel, not Tom, fuck you. You don't know if that was the day that happened, and you might end up being the reason that they end up surviving that night. Because they didn't get to choose to exist politically or not, they just do, because the Overton window wasn't fair to them. So, I don't know if there's really anything else I can say in a video like this, but I do want to thank you for watching. If you haven't subbed already, if you haven't gone over to Patreon to check that stuff out, if you haven't hit the bell notification icon, please do. Just hit any of those things. That would be awesome. This isn't a video that's been chopped up from a live stream, and this has been done in one take, so if there are some mistakes, be somewhat nice in the comment section, though, of course, if you want to send me a death threat in there, that's perfectly acceptable, too. You do you. But thank you for watching. I haven't been able to say this because I've not done edited content in a while, but insert end of video tagline here.